preached a sermon about Nadab and Abihu in a long, long time. Now, when I was younger growing up, I don't think he got through 6 months without hearing a lesson on Nadab and Abihu. And it was at least mentioned once a month. It was pretty common. But the thing is that after a while, everybody that will understands the message, and them that don't, it doesn't make a difference. And so preachers tend to move on and not preach about certain things, because I guess being human, we forget that every few years there's a new generation. There's new people. There's new things. And we just forget to preach on it because we remember, well, everybody already knows that. Well, maybe not so. So I thought today I would preach about Nadab and Abihu, because I think there's a lesson there that we really need to learn. So we're going to go to Leviticus, the 10th chapter. We want to read 1, 2, and 3. And then we're going to skip down to 10 and 11. Because the verses in between are just telling what needed to be done. So Leviticus, the 10th chapter, verses 1, 2, and 3, and then 10 and 11. Now Nadab and Abihu, the sons of Aaron, each took his censer and put fire in it, and laid incense on it, and offered unauthorized fire before the Lord, which he had not commanded them. And fire came out from before the Lord and consumed them, and they died before the Lord. Then Moses said to Aaron, "This is what the Lord has said. Among those who are near me, I will be sanctified, and before all the people I will be glorified." And Aaron held his peace. And now down to 10 and 11. You are to distinguish between the holy and the common, between the unclean and the clean. And you are to teach the people of Israel all the statutes that the Lord has spoken to them by Moses. When I was younger, we had heard this so many times, and it was explained to us. But sometimes I think we forget all these lessons, and maybe we didn't learn everything about it. How many times do we stop to think that Nadab and Abihu, who got this terrible punishment, were the sons of Aaron? They weren't just any run-of-the-mill priests. They were the sons of Aaron, the first high priest. And all priests of Israel in the Old Testament were not just Levites, but came from Aaron and his children. So these two are related to every single priest. Wow. They were not just nobodies. After all, they were Moses' nephews. They were somebody. I think a lot of us, especially in the climate of the world today, go, that sure doesn't sound much like a loving God. We're in a climate today where everything has got to be positive. You can't have any negatives. Well, you can't have electricity if you don't have a positive or negative. You can't have good if you don't have evil. But I want you to think, before we get into how blessed these two were before this happened, I want you to think about this God and how loving He was. He had placed the children of Israel in Egypt to save them from a famine. When Egypt was no longer a good place for them, He sent Moses to lead them out. When they came to the Red Sea, with Pharaoh's chariots chasing them, He parted the sea, and they crossed on dry land. And then He closed the seas up on Pharaoh and his chariots and his horses. When they had to wander in the wilderness because of their own disbelief, He provided manna. And now He has appeared to them and given them a law. That's a loving God. A very loving God. He has shown His love continually. Sometimes we don't realize how blessed Nadab and Abihu were. I want you to turn to Exodus, the 24th chapter. Exodus 24. Now that you're in the 24th chapter of Exodus, I want you to turn to verses 9 through 11. Then Moses and Aaron, Nadab and Abihu, and 70 of the elders of Israel went up, and they saw the God of Israel. There was under His feet as it were a pavement of sapphire stone, like the very heaven for clearness. And He did not lay His hand on the chief men of the people of Israel. They beheld God, then ate and drank. Can you imagine seeing God? Very, very few people in the history of mankind have been given that blessing. And these two were some of those very few that actually got to see God. We're not going to be able to do that until that great day when Jesus comes back. That's a pretty good blessing, don't you think? Being able to see God. They were special people. Now, we know that Jesus is with us when we partake of the Lord's Supper. But we know that by faith and not by sight. The cups don't levitate. The bread doesn't break itself. He may be here, but we know that only through faith. We don't see it. I want you to turn to Leviticus 9, 1 and 2, and then we're going to go down to 22 through 24. So, on the 8th day, Moses called Aaron and his sons and the elders of Israel, and he said to Aaron, "Take for yourself a bull calf for sin offering, and a ram for a burnt offering, both without blemish, and offer them before the Lord. And say to the people of Israel, take a male goat for a sin offering, and a calf and a lamb, both a year old without blemish, for a burnt offering." Now we're going to go to Leviticus. It's still the 9th chapter. We're going to skip down to 22 through 24 because I don't think we need to go through all the things that they were told to do about the sacrifice. I don't know about you, but some books of the Bible are very difficult to read through. And Leviticus is one of those. Because it's a law book. And I don't know about you, but if you get any law book from any country, anywhere, and you start to read it, if you aren't asleep after 3 pages, you're a better person than I am. Then Aaron lifted up his hands toward the people and blessed them. And they came down from offering the sin offering and the burnt offering and the peace offerings. And Moses and Aaron went into the tent of the meeting. When they came out, they blessed the people. And the glory of the Lord appeared to all the people. And fire came out from before the Lord and consumed the burnt offering and the pieces of fat on the altar. When all the people saw it, they shouted and fell on their faces. The first sacrifice that, if you read all that in between them, you would see that Nadab and Abihu were part of it. They were doing this and that and putting the fat on the altar. The first sacrifice that they were part of, as part of this covenant with God, God took part in it. And they didn't have to see it by faith. They saw fire from heaven coming down and consuming the stuff on the altar. God himself took part. Now you would think that would cause everybody present to realize how holy God is, how powerful he is, how important he is, and treat him in a like manner. But Nadab and Abihu, and you know, one thing that I never really considered was that same fire that was part of that first sacrifice is the same thing that consumed them. Because they had done 2 things that terribly angered God. They did not understand that God is holy and he needs to be worshipped holy. You can't mix the common with the holy. detailed rules for how to worship Him. What things can be used, what things can't. Because worship to Him is holy. And you can't just use anything. The second is presumption. They used what the King James calls strange fire, but the ESV makes it actually a little bit clearer. Unauthorized fire. You know, that seems... Well, the fire wasn't authorized, so it wasn't holy, and God didn't authorize it. He didn't tell them to use it. Well, that just doesn't seem like much. And yet, go back to thinking about God being holy. He expects to be treated as holy and as the boss. They used unauthorized fire. Now I'll tell you, I'll show my ignorance because sometimes I think it's really good that people understand that just because somebody stands before the congregation doesn't mean that he necessarily knows that much more than anybody else. Make sure I've got the right places here. Okay. I always assumed, maybe it was because I wasn't listening to the lesson very well, you know. But I sort of always assumed that they disobeyed God. That this strange fire, this unauthorized fire, was not what God commanded, and that's why they were destroyed. I want you to go now, we're going to go to Leviticus, the 16th chapter, verse 1, and then we're going to skip down to verse 12. The Lord spoke to Moses after the death of the two sons of Aaron, when they drew near before the Lord and died. Now go down to verse 12. And he shall take a censer full of coals of fire from the altar before the Lord, and 2 handfuls of sweet incense beaten small, and he shall bring it inside the veil, and put the incense on the fire before the Lord, that the cloud of incense may cover the mercy seat that is over the testimony, so that he does not die. God had not yet told them how to use those censers. That's a little plate that you can put the incense on. He hadn't told them how to do it yet. This is after they have died, and now the rules come down on what to do. They didn't disobey a command. They did something that wasn't commanded. They worshiped God in a way that He hadn't yet told them how to do it. They decided, in their wisdom, that they knew best how to worship God. We don't want to hear it, because we like to do whatever we want. But God is holy. And he demands that his children respect that and not have the sin of presumption. Well, the Lord didn't say not to. No, he didn't. He did not say not to do that. He hadn't told them yet what to do. But they decided that it would be okay. Maybe because the Lord didn't say not to. That might have been their reasoning. Well, we want to worship God. We'll show him and we'll do what we are human. We're common. God wants us to be holy, but those things that we think and that we want and that we desire, that's human, not holy. It doesn't fit with the spirit of our age to have the idea that if we want to serve God, we need to do it his way. It doesn't fit with our culture, our ideas. But God was a loving God in the Old Testament. And he's a loving God now. But he demands that we treat him respectfully. And that we do what he says. Way too many people decide that they should serve the Lord the way they want to. That's what Nadab and Abihu did. They served the Lord the way they thought was best. If we don't do what God wants us to do as we serve him, fire is not going to come down from heaven and crisp us. I'm not saying that there's not times that I wish that wouldn't happen, but it's not gonna. God has given us the blessing of grace and mercy to give us plenty of time to take care of our human frailties. He has given us time. But he's also warned us. We need to be people of the Word. We need to be people who say, "Thus saith the Lord." When I was growing up, I heard that a lot. Every third sermon. You know, what does the Lord say? What's the chapter and verse? What does the Lord say? I think we need to get back to remembering that we need to be children of the Word. We need to be in the Word and do what the Word says. It's too easy for all of us to decide to do things the way we think is best. God is God, and he knows better than we do. Now, I've gotten a few tradespeople that aren't very good. Because they're human and sometimes they fail. But see, I have a rule. If I'm hiring you to do a job for me, I'm doing it because I assume you know more about the job than I do. And so I take my mouth and I do that. Well, if we know to do that with human people, I don't tell my doctor what I need. I tell my doctor what the symptoms are, and he tells me what I need. If we can understand that in this imperfect world, we need to understand that in the perfect spiritual world, we need to be even more conscious of God as the expert, and we're not. I don't know, I'll just give it another little thing. I do read instructions on how to put things together. Unfortunately, sometimes I read the instructions and I skip from step 3 to step 17. And every single time, it's a disaster, and I have to go all the way back and start over. It's important that as Christians, we love God and search His Word